What's up guys, Gage here, and in today's video I'm going to be showing you how I built a modern slash farmhouse style canopy bed frame. This frame honestly wasn't that hard to build, and it looks like $1,000+ bed frame when it actually cost you under $200 to build. So why don't we go ahead and get started.
Hold it real quick before I continue. I put a lot of work into making these videos, and I don't throw videos out every day because I want to put some effort and passion into my content to make it as helpful and entertaining as possible. So if you haven't already, please subscribe. It means the absolute world to me, and it's completely free. So yeah, bye-bye. Alright, so this part is fully optional. You can just buy the boards from the store, but whenever you get lumber from the store, it's usually 1/4 or 1/2 inch off, and I wanted true measurements. But I don't have any major hardware stores around, so what I did was I glued 2x4s and 1x4s together, and then I cut them down into 2x2 posts. And I also cut some 2x4s down to 1x3s. Next, I drilled pocket holes in the 1x6s and the 1x3s, and then sanded the boards down. Alright, so now we have all of our main boards cut and sanded, and I'm actually going to have to do one more of these for the top of the headboard, but I'm going to do that later. But now that we have all of them cut and sanded, we're going to go ahead and start assembling the frame of the bed. Alright, so I have two beams here with the front board on, and I'm going to use these pocket holes and screw them into this beam. I'm going to be measuring 9 inches from the bottom of this to the bottom of this board where it will meet. Alright, so here's our front panel all put together. And you might notice this board is flush with the front, and there's a gap underneath it. But the bottom board is flush with the back, and there's a gap between this and the front. And the reason being is because whenever we put our bed behind here, it's going to meet in a 90-degree this way. But if it was up at the top, there would be a little corner of the pole poking out, and it would leave a gap in between the mattress and this board. So we're making this one flush with the back so there's no gap. And I'll show you a better explanation later on whenever I have both the corners. I belong to you. I belong to you. Alright, so now I have the sideboard for the bottom, and I'm just gonna line it up right next to the front board like this and make sure it's right on the edge and not flush with the outside like this. So we're just gonna make sure it's right here on this side, on the inside. Alright, so there's our corner. And if you can have somebody balance this board for you, that will be best. I don't have anybody, so I just kind of balanced it and held it in place. You can do it by yourself if you really want to. And now we can go ahead and put our other one on. Alright, so now I'm going to attach the back side, the back panel that we already built. Alright, now I'm going to kind of show you what I was talking about earlier about the corners. Your mattress or box spring will fit right in here at a 90-degree angle, so there won't be any gaps. But if we put these boards flush with the outside of this pole, there would be a little gap of the pole sticking in here, and therefore there would be a little gap about this wide on each side for your mattress, and you don't want that. You want it pretty close up to it. So that's why we put them on the inside and the tops are flush. Okay, I'm about to attach the top rails, and honestly this would be better to do whenever you first attach the bottom side rails to the first panel, because then you just have 4 and then all you have to do is just attach it to one side instead of having to hold it up like this. But I didn't do that, so I'm just gonna go ahead and do it like this. And I have some clamps up here to kind of help me hold it. Hopefully it doesn't hit me. Alright, so I cut this board, and it is the exact same board as this and the front one. So this is going to be the top of the headboard. I have this at 53 inches from the ground, because from here to the top of my bed is about 23 inches. Yeah, because this is 3 inches, and there will be 20 inches of the fabric in between this and the top of my bed. So, from the ground to the top of this is 53 inches. And I'm going to go ahead and attach this with the pocket holes. And I'm doing this one, unlike this one's flush with the back, which you can do it flush with the front if you want, it just won't match the rest of these. But this one is going to be flush with this, because your fabric's going to be flush with this as well, and it'll just be very flush across here. Okay, so I just got those ends that we cut off with the long 2x4s, and I just stripped them down to 1 inch wide. So we're going to attach those around the base of the frame so that we can set our box spring on top of that. And now I'm going to add some pocket holes to that so we can screw it into the side of the frame. Alright, so I got all my strips cut, and they all have pocket holes in them. And we're going to put these around the base of this at the very bottom so that your box spring or mattress, and if you do a mattress you need to put like plywood, but I'm just putting my box spring so the box spring will sit on these. Okay, so we just got all of the little rails added onto the side, and these are for support of the box spring. And it's fine if you're doing a box spring, because all the support of the box spring is just on the edges and there's not really anything in the middle except for bracing. But if you're just putting a mattress straight in here, you can't do this obviously, because it'll just sag through. But if you want to do just a mattress, I would suggest putting plywood across all of this, and then running a center beam from there to there, and then putting another little post underneath right in the center, so it will hold it in the center and it won't sag. But the way I did it is fine for a box spring. Alright, so I'm filling the pocket holes on the top beams with this wood filler, and I'm only doing it on the 2 side ones, and I'm not doing it on the end one yet because we're gonna have to take this panel off along with the back side to be able to like move it into the room. But once we get it into the room, we can either just leave it, you can leave it if you want to, but it'll look more seamless if you fill them. So if you want to, you can move this into the room and then put the wood filler in this one. But as for all the rest of them except for the back one, you can go ahead and fill them. Okay, for the stain, I'm going to be mixing this Early American and this Weathered Oak, because the Early American's like, it's not super dark, but it's kind of dark, and this is a pretty light one, so I want it to be close to this color but lighter, so I'm going to be mixing these two for the stain. Okay, now that the stain has dried, I'm going to seal it off with this polyacrylic. And this is a clear satin finish, so it'll give it a little bit of sheen, but not too much.
Alright, so now that the poly has dried, I'm going to be sanding with this 1500 grit sandpaper. And this just gets like the hard surface of the poly from like the bubbles and stuff. And it'll make the surface just like really smooth. And I'm going to be using 1/2 inch plywood to put back here, and it measures 64 by 40 inches. Okay, so I have the plywood cut for this back now, and I'm going to measure the distance from this post to this post, and then from this board to this board, and then that's where our foam's going to be. And so I'm just going to mark that on this board, and then we can stick our foam on there. Okay, so the overall width of the bed is 64.5 inches, and this plywood is 63 inches. So we're gonna subtract that. We get 2.5. Then we're gonna divide 2.5 by 2, so we get 1 1/4. So that means that we're gonna have a 1 1/4 gap on each side of the plywood, and then we're gonna mark that, and then our foam will start at each of those marks. So what I did is I measured 2 inches from the bottom in, so that will be the bottom of our foam. Alright, so this side is the top, and see I have my mark running along here, along the bottom, and now I'm going to place the foam within these boundaries. And we're using, well actually it's 1 inch foam, but it needs to be 2 inches so it will be flush with the poles. So I'm just going to stack this foam on top of there. Alright, so now that I have both the pieces of foam cut, I'm going to be using this spray adhesive. You can get whatever kind you want, but I just had this already. So I'm going to be using this to attach the foam to the plywood, and also to stack the foam on top of each other. And if you can get a piece of foam that's big enough to this entire thing, that's 2 inch, that would be the best option you could possibly do. And we're just going to spray a generous amount of this onto the foam, and then we're going to flip it and stick it to the plywood. Okay, now that I have both of the foam sheets on, I'm gonna get some more and do this side, and then we can put the matting on. I think that's what it's called, the mat sheet. I think it's called matting. No, batting. We're gonna put the batting on next, and then we can put the fabric on. And since we cut this foam and it has a lip on each side, this foam will fit directly into the square that we have. It's that square right there. It'll fit directly into there and won't have any overhang on the top or the bottom. And after I did that, I went ahead and got some batting and I covered the top. And instead of stretching it over the sides on the plywood, I just went ahead and made it straight down of the side of the foam. So it will be more square when it fits into that square that we have cut out, instead of having like a rounded edge. And I just attached this foam using spray adhesive, and I just made sure that the top was nice and square. And after this dries, I'm gonna get the fabric and then put the fabric on here. All right, so as you see, I have now covered the foam and batting with the fabric, and all we did was just stretched it across. We stapled the top first, and then the bottom, the sides, and then we went ahead and added all the rest of the staples on the side, the top, and then the sides, and then the bottom. And then we also folded in the corners like so that it would be nice and smooth. So now, oh, also I want to point out, the fabric goes straight down off the edge of the foam instead of wrapping around the back of the plywood, because if it was off the plywood, we would have an angle like this and it would not fit into the square perfectly. So we decided to make it go straight down and then be stapled right off the edge of the foam like this. Now that we have this done, we can fit it into the square, and then we can screw it in there, and then we'll basically be done. I went ahead and put 4 screws in each corner so that whenever I get it up in this square, I can just screw it in with my gun, because once it's in here, it kind of It'll kind of stay for you, but you gotta screw it in and make sure it's there. And also, once we get it in there, I'm gonna add an inch piece of wood in between the centerpiece, because if not, the headboard can move forward and backwards.
This is what I'm talking about, where I'm gonna put a piece of inch wood, because this is an inch and then it's even with the pole, so this will be an inch. But see, if you push this, if it'll focus right, if you push on this back, the forward will come up, and you don't want that, so we're gonna add a board right here and then screw it into that board so that it can't do that.
Alright, so now that we have the headboard attached, this is pretty much done. But since it's not in the room, I'm going to have to disassemble this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this board and this board off, and also this board, and this board, and the headboard, of course. But ideally, I would take off these two and those two, because then I would have a lot less to take off and it would just be easier that way. But since I filled in these pocket holes, we can't do that. And I wanted to fill in these because these are the boards that you really see when you walk into a room and see this bed. But yeah, ideally I would take those off, but since I filled those pocket holes, we can't. So these pocket holes are still open, and so are those. So we're going to be taking the end boards off, which are these two and those. And so yeah, I'm just going to disassemble it like that, and then we're going to put it together in the room. Alright guys, that about does it for this video. I really hope you learned something from it, and I hope you enjoyed it as well. So I guess I'll see you in the next one. I'm gonna do this. Oh shoot. Hope the audio is good, love.